I promise not to slag anyone off and swear.
Oh, I promise to slag people off and swear. It's my whole thing. These 10-minute interviews never last 10 minutes. They always run over, and they seem to run over more and more and more. We'll get up to a full 40 minutes before long. It'll be ridiculous.
Right.
But being a human, being visual effects adjacent and sort of film and TV adjacent for a number of years, I wanted to get the opinion and the perspective of someone who's more on the inside from both the VFX production point of view, but also the client side point of view about the shift that we're seeing in film and TV generally. Like, the industry in post-production and content creation is changing. There's a lot of people now getting their entertainment from YouTube and TikTok, and we're seeing less and less go into maybe standard broadcast, and I think even the streamers are starting to struggle. From your perspective, how much is the industry changing from that point of view?
Well, clearly the people I mostly speak to are the traditional content makers who are producing television and film. I said to somebody recently, if you turn up on a set this summer, if you can find one, it's getting busier in studios. If you turn up on a set, it will always resemble the set that you would have stood on 10 years ago, 20 years ago. There's a bunch of actors, there's a camera, there's a generator, there are some lights. There's a varying size of visual effects department depending on the project and the budget. And there's, if there's visual effects involved, there'll be a green screen most likely still, So it doesn't really look like it's changing if you just turned up, But there's been so much conversation and articles written and material written, and it is obviously changing. And I look at my kids to only see how it's changing. And I'm living in a household with 16, 17, 18 and 20. So I can really monitor their habits of how they view things and watch things. And it is completely different. And then you watch your own habits changing as a consumer, right? Because everyone in the TV and film business or content creation or anything to do with the media industry, we're all consumers of it as well, right? So everyone's always been an expert if they spend their lives and enjoying their entertainment on a TV screen or in the movies or on their phone or what have you. So on large things aren't changing on the surface. Big changes in a contracting industry and budgets getting tighter and more restricted, or people starting the job later, less people on the job. Those are the palpable things. But we've always been in a technologically driven business. The visual effects and post-production community, they're almost tech businesses. The shifts there from creating your own software 50 years ago, because you couldn't buy it off the shelf, to then buying it off the shelf, to the clever bit at visual effects houses and post companies is the code and script written to join all the off-the-shelf software that you bought together and where you can provide efficiencies. But we've always had to be early adopters, or several in the community, leading the way with there's this new thing. Because in an era of a market that after COVID grew, there was this dam wall lifted and there was a 18-month period of mayhem after COVID where things were happening and people were using practices in business they would never have considered before to get through this sort of deluge of data flying around at you. And, I think everyone thought finally it's a license to make some money again and repair the damage done after a couple of very difficult years. But the flood tide subsided long before the actors' strike. You could sense if you look back, autumn of 22, it stops to be as crazy. But of course, in a post pipeline and VFX pipeline, there's all that data coming throughout 23, even though there's an actors' strike. Just there's nothing new, and that's is recent history. But we've always been early adopters. I remember in COVID, everyone watched The Mandalorian as one of the big things on telly in COVID, and we all loved it. and we were
Good old
all
virtual production.
We were all keeping an eye on it, but within hours of that going out, the phone was ringing. I say the phone was ringing, and I've just dated myself horrendously. The messages were coming in, and suddenly we had to all be experts about virtual production instantly. And we all did become experts pretty quickly. We were literally within days of going into lockdown, having meetings about it and working out how to incorporate Unreal into all our pipelines and use the downtime of people who might be becoming free that you wanted to hang on to do real R&D into it. And so, all the things that come along that are new, the same. I keep going back to the business has always been about making improvements and efficiencies. And I think, if I go back to the days of film, sorry, let me do that again. The days of film. Everyone loves film. I'm very delighted to see Jen.
Somewhere Hoyt van Hoyten has just gone.
But also, I'm watching it making a resurgence, right? As cinema seeks to differentiate itself in IMAX cinemas and amazing films like Sinners with 7 different ways of seeing it, shot IMAX, 2 different styles and immersively and all sorts of stuff. And it looks incredible.
I think that's probably a good example, because it's one of the things that's happening in the space is when you look at a lot of communication or a lot of social media posts that go out from visual effects artists, they're talking about how dire the situation in post-production is. And when you look from a consumer side, it's not necessarily that the industry looks dire, but actually it feels like it's shifting and changing in the way that theatre did. I worry for cinema that it's going to go down the route of theatre. People are going to get priced out. It's going to get too expensive. It'll become this niche thing that you do 2 times a year and get dressed up all fancy for. And then 10 years later, you just go in your shorts because everyone's accustomed to it. But it's places like, it's films like Sinners. It's events like Secret Cinema that do all the immersive stuff and the show around it that feel like they're finding ways to keep it fresh and keep it new, rather than relying on people watching on smaller and smaller and smaller screens to see their content.
Come on, when Tom Cruise is not just trying to publicize a movie, but publicize going to the cinema, you are in big trouble. Turning up at other people's premieres. They are very cognizant of the difficulties they're competing with. I went to someone's house at the weekend. They had Glastonbury on. I think everybody wishes they were there, right? If they've got kids or whatever. And the telly is giant.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant. And, if you only have to hark back to going to the Odeon in your local Odeon with 5 screens or 7 or even 8 screens, the screens 7 and 8 are as bad as they're worse than the large telly in someone's living room. And they are failing. Because why would I pay money to sit and watch something I can really have the similar experience on my big TV with a similar amount of people in those screens, depending on how many kids and if you can get them to...
Last thing that I saw on a screen that size was Brightburn, that Superman takeoff horror thing where he's comes to the planet Evil. That's it.
They're seeking a better experience. I think that is the cinema where there's multiple things released every week, and you used to go to the cinema and in the blockbuster days of the heady days of the 80s and even into the 90s, if you couldn't get in to see your movie, you'd go see the comedy on the alternative screen. You'd come back a few days later, and we were always going. It was one of the only forms of entertainment in a way, and it was portable, right? And I went to the cinema a couple of weeks ago on a Monday, student night, and it was packed. And it was £6 for a student to go and see it. So there is something involved in pricing and value. As I said, I have a 20-year-old in my house who says, love going to the cinema, but it's just not on my budget. I've got to eat.
There's an episode of Black Books where he goes to the cinema and orders like a popcorn and a drink. He's like, oh, excuse me, I've ordered a popcorn and a drink and now I've got no money. Like, if you want to go to the cinema now, it's like a £50 event.
There aren't 5 people chucking popcorn and a drink at you. There's one really harassed young person trying to, with a big queue, So the experience is interesting. And cinemas are, one of their big expenses is changing the carpet in those old Odeon style cinemas. They get worn out traditionally with people dropping ice creams and kids running around and lots of footfall. And I remember someone telling me when it was their mission to upgrade to digital, that they were going, look, I can't upgrade to digital. I've got to change the carpet. I sat and watched Bond, No Time to Die, coming out of COVID, going, the first film. We'd done a tiny bit of work on it, and I sat there and watched it and got wet. And I thought, is this some new immersive 4D experience? But it turned out the local cinema had a hole in the roof they couldn't afford to fix, and it rained. So, they need to go to...
So cinemas are becoming churches. we need to save the roof campaign.
And then there are the posh cinemas, for people who want to go and have dinner and then go to the cinema and take their bottle of wine in. I don't think they're going anywhere. They're showing old movies. And there's the Prince Charles that was recently...
But that's it. That's why I think there's a sense of some of them becoming more like theatre. Like you say, you've got the Prince Charles, you've got the everyman cinemas where you can order food to your table or to your chair or whatever it is.
Damn.
But they feel like, to me, sometimes they feel like they're still holding on. Their claws are into a style of consuming content or seeing entertainment that is shifting and changing. But there's a lot going on with it. Like it's very expensive, and I think that fewer people are now able to go. But there's also, it seems, more of a move to slag off a lot of how films get made than there is the sense of technical wonder at the marvel that is cinema. It used to be like you go and see T2 or The Abyss or something in sort of earlier visual effects days, and you're like, this does not look like it's completely real, but wow, it looks fucking amazing.
Yeah, that harnessing.
And now it's shifted.
The rise of freeing your imagination. I mean, cinema's always done that, right? Going back to Méliès and in-camera tricks and American Wealth in London, some of the best makeup you've ever seen in prosthetics, to the T2, and the rising out of the liquid, which we still look at that today, and it looks slightly dated, but at the time it was a massive wow. I'm seeing storytelling pushed to the edge, and obviously then it becomes part of everything, and nothing is made that doesn't have some form of digital visual effects, unless it's a Danish art house film that's committed to not using any form of visual effects. They're great as well, I think that part of the reality is, and it boils down to any kind of future evolvement, is people just want a good story. Right? And catering to people watching telly on their mobiles and their laptops. And I have witnessed people very close to me watching telly with the laptop out and the mobile out. And I've asked them what's going on, and they kind of know. And I read articles about dumbing down scripts and keep explaining plot, whereas it used to be show, don't tell. In fact, Steve McQueen used to cut large amounts of dialogue out of scripts and just say, I'll turn to the camera and I'll look. You'll understand what is going on. He was brilliant at that. And I think that's evolving. But I think people just want a good story. And we've watched the financial takeover of Hollywood by financial institutions and investors who want quarterly reports. And the risk take, when a young, it's 50 years ago, one of the best films ever made came out of cinema that still makes me nervous when I get in the sea, right? If I let my mind go there. And I can't see the bottom, amazing. And the studio hired it's always a risk investing large amounts of money in something you don't know if it's going to be successful. It's quite entrepreneurial and it's risk taking. But the people making the risk taking employ other talented artists to do the risk taking for them. And I think large financial institutions are risk averse in a risk taking business, and they look to what the IP ownership issue and the playing it safe issue. Look, can you imagine? If Nolan hadn't been directing Oppenheimer, if you and I started pitching Oppenheimer to studios around the world on paper, that's not going to be a great movie, is it? But it made $1 billion, and so did Barbie, an original written thing. And we mentioned Sinners earlier on, which is the standout movie for me of the year so far. And it's made and will carry on making great revenue because word of mouth's really important. You know, you start reading reviews and they're either interesting or not, but they're about the review very often rather than the movie and the witticism of the person writing and all the other stuff. I used to trust Barry Norman back in the day quite heavily. But I'm really dating myself here, aren't I, Tom?
Yeah, phones ringing, Barry Norman, 50-year-old films. I mean, come on.
But, so really when someone says to you, that is brilliant, you must go and see it. If a handful of people tell you, I went and saw this and it's amazing, that is a very big tempter for me to go and do it. And even the trailer to that movie doesn't do it justice. So, again, people are in search of good storytelling, and the expense that we mentioned of going out. If you've got children like you, that's a babysitter. You've just made it a very expensive evening. And to go and see a film that's all right or not good, or to carry on using that budget for one night at the cinema for a year's worth of subscription to unlimited content, and especially in an era where people are really watching their pennies. We're fighting inflation constantly and the cost of living crisis that's very real. And people go out for dinner and cry when they get the bill, or don't go out for, people are really watching. I've even seen the way people subscribe changing rather than having everything. I mean, people are subscribing in different ways. They're going through one for a few months, cancelling it, resubscribing later when there's stuff, and having one on the go all the time that they binge on, whatever,
Yeah. This is how I will watch Severance when I come around to watching Severance season 2. I'll get a month of Apple TV and then I'll bin it off.
Absolutely brilliant. There are 2 seasons of it. It's amazing. There's
season
loads of great
good
stuff, quality content there. And then, if you live in a household where someone's not into watching Severance, you'll have to watch it on the train on your way to work, whatever it is. It's like, these are all the new things. But if it's good, people will still want to watch it and still want to find it. But I think what we're admitting here is there's a lot of stuff that isn't good. And I'm the first person in the visual effects business to say great visual effects aren't enough to make me want to go and see it. And we're just a tool in the storytelling toolbox, right? Which is really important when we come on to talk about some of the stuff. It's got to be a good story. In fact, a few shonky effects, who cares if the actors are brilliant and the storytelling is brilliant, the writing is brilliant, and I'm into it. You're not paying any attention to any of that. You're just transported, which is, what we all seek, I think. So
when I was at drama school, one of our directors used to make us perform under strip lighting with no props, no costume, whatever, because he said if the acting is good, it will keep people's attention. The rest of it is just a luxury and just dressing. It doesn't mean that stuff can be crap. It doesn't mean that your lighting, when you do stage lighting, can just be whatever it is. It's still got to have thought. But when you add it, it should elevate something that is already good. And I see visual effects in much the same way. If you need it to tell your story is not good enough by itself. If it will make your story better, if it will enhance something that is already good, crack on.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, if you see a crease in the backdrop, I've not done my job, and yet there are a handful of visual effect shots in the history of cinema that can remove you from the drama, which is the opposite of the intention. But we won't talk about those. They're well publicized now. They're on lists online. But again, online, it's streaming, it's the internet, it's that people go out less. In the back when I was a kid, if you wanted to do anything, you had to go out. It was boredom or out after you read a book or whatever, and they're so less bored these days. They've got constant dopamine going on in their lives, right? Yeah. And so have I. I mean, am I kidding? I sit there scrolling like a lunatic. I had to take Twitter off my phone years ago in favor of reading a book because I felt better at the end of it. But, so taste in society is changing. I've got 1,500 decks and graphs and things of how consumer habits are changing in media and where the kids are putting their eyeballs. And it is bad news for traditional outlets. If you if you're going to make the 8th installment in something, maybe look at Sinners and Oppenheimer and Barbie and spreading your risk with lower budget things, which I'm sure there'll be a positive knock-on effect as everybody works it out. I think the key
Yeah.
thing is, I'm very much reminded that, I saw what happened to the photography industry. And I knew photographers who, once they stopped making a living with prints, they've got the neg. And if you want to print, that was a huge source of income. I saw what happened when film went digital to people who made a living making bulk prints for cinema and, all the lab processes. And then, I've got a sort of a phone with a great camera in it, and, use it, and I take photos and I never look at them like everyone else generally. But does that make me a photographer? It doesn't make me a photographer. I would never say, I'm a photographer, because I have a camera in my pocket with a phone, right, with a really good lens in it, and takes good resolution and tarts pictures up automatically and weirdly. And I am watching Gen Z seek out a more analog experience, which is quite lovely. This sort of revolution, and people are catering to it with new edition cameras that seek to replicate the analog experience with no screen on the back, and a digital winding and digital processing after you've taken your digital film straight. For a kid, I've got no vinyl. My kid has got loads of vinyl. I find it magical, and I'm a bit jealous. So I got rid of all mine, and I wish I kept it.
Should passed it on.
And it's got all the records I had as well, which is very sad, because it means what's going on with those kids who went and started playing in bands and performing in rooms above pubs. That seems to be a lesser thing. Again, you want to have fun, go out.
This is what I'm worried about. Is I told you these would run over. We're well over. But one of the things that I am continually concerned for, particularly now, obviously you've got AI. There's loads of stuff going on. Younger people still like old music. We still like old films. We still like stuff that is analog, is good stories, is good craft, is good art.
Yeah, book sales are massively healthy.
Yeah. So, final question, or final thought then, and it's a two-parter. One, is the industry in trouble? And two, how do young people get in and kick it up the arse?
They're both brilliant questions. So, is the industry in trouble? The industry has been in a contracted state now for a while. It is evolving. It is going to where it will need to get to. Sadly, the economics of life in the industry, and you can look at other industries and hit the pattern there, mean if the supply of services in the industry is here to meet a demand from 2 or 3 years ago and shrunk a bit, but the demand has not come back up where everyone would like it or even need it, there will be a clearing out. Economics will dictate that the supply will shrink back to meet the demand. Then we'll have stability again, which is what the industry needs. It's not what people need, it's what the industry needs. And people will have to work it out. I don't want to use horror words like the loom in factories in Manchester, when someone discovered I don't need 100 people. I've got this machine that I bought that will do twice the work and needs 6 people to operate it. And I don't think we're there yet with the AI. And I think, again, we're just making tools to be efficient, right? And then the rest of the content world can worry about the lawsuit period. It's still very nascent. Last year, it was investors tripping themselves up to go to the California gold rush of AI that is now. They don't quite know how to monetize it yet. Everyone's in that phase. I better get in early, like Bitcoin. It's the new Bitcoin, right? AI, in terms of business. Then everyone's got this dystopian Western fear of it, based on watching movies and reading science fiction. And generally, it's worrying. What people are worried about in all aspects of life, the loom is coming to kill us all in our industry. But we're not there yet. And there's a period where that period, you remember when mobile phones came out and everyone was on the bus going, guess where I am? What a fuck.
There's too much Dom Jolly.
We're a bit in the period of AI where, guess what I can do? I can make a bloke and his arm will turn into a beer bottle by accident because it's hallucinating. That's where we're at. Look what I can do. Isn't it cool? Not look what I can do. It's completely directable and free from being sued for scraping the internet for someone else's IP. And so, again, AI is extremely broad term, right? It's what are you talking about? Machine learning? Are you talking about generative prompting? What are you actually talking about? So it's this huge catch-all like we've had with virtual production, where we always had virtual production. We had back screen projection on old movies that had shadows
Yeah.
sometimes, right? But that was virtual production. You're talking about LED screens, volume screens, and so again, we have to be careful with our language here. But there'll be a period like with dust busting. It used to take a dozen people 2 weeks to paint the dust off a film. And then someone invented some software that auto did it, except it removed your eyeballs as well if you're an actor. And so what it became was, instead of having 12 people work for 2 weeks, it became one person did 2 days of checking the software, auto removing the dust and restoring the eyeballs and other things that you didn't want taken away. So there will be efficiencies, and the business needs efficiencies. But what I don't think will happen is that the people who generate AI software and things like that, it's not been made by creative people, it's been made by tech people. And it will become this other tool for creative people to harness. And it may well be liberating in some forms. Again, we've got years watching the new lawsuits coming with Midjourney and Hollywood, and we'll all be keeping our eye out on where that takes us. But people training their own, software to be more efficient is exactly what the economics of our industry requires. So there is opportunity. But right now, people just need jobs and to survive in it, however they can, or to pivot and find an alternative, which is really difficult depending on your age and experience and how long you've been doing it. So it's a really tricky evolution and a contraction. I've got like someone said, there was an article, that the future could be, I'm sat in my living room and I've just watched Avengers, but I want to change the ending and Tony Stark lives, and it does it for me. I find that horrifying. I want my content curated by a brilliant storyteller. I don't want to be writing my own books for my kids to read. Right? I'm still on Roger Hargreaves with my disabled, so I love it. But
somebody I spoke to recently made a similar argument, saying in the future you'll be able to sit in front of your TV and say, "All right, make me an action film starring me and my friends." And I don't want to see that, because half of the love of all of this is being able to discuss it with other people. And I don't want to see, I would not be an action hero. I don't want to see that. It's not a thing.
And YouTube, which is wildly successful in one way, but hard to monetize for anyone trying to make content in others, which is heading... Hi YouTube, which is becoming, and is set to become the major broadcaster, if you like, of the next decade. And I'm sure it will succeed. As models fail all around us, to do with all sorts of, I call it the pie of challenge, the difficulty pie, advertising, revenue, where is it going? And it's all internet related, it's all migrated. And the budgets aren't there for people who've been doing things a certain way. But YouTube, again, there's a vast amount of content on there not worth watching, right? If you're discerning. So I think one of the next platforms will be using all of the efficiencies of creating content, but creatively selecting people who are good at it to generate a reputation. I've got a funny feeling Reed, Mr. Netflix, is very cognizant of that, and he's on the board of a massive AI company. So I'm witnessing how it's all going to change. People are using visual effects in the micro drama, these studios that churn out stuff for your mobile in the vertical format, and they've started to use visual effects. I'm sure they're not yet at the quality, but someone will take that as a format and make something amazing. And everyone will have to adjust. So I just think constantly chatting about it with everybody, constantly reading about it, being alert to it, while being alert to the real problems the industry are facing, as they bleed into each other, these periods.
So what about young people then? How do they come in? How do they shake up the industry? How do they get started? Are we worried? What do we need to do?
I am worried. I'm worried on the grounds that there'll always be opportunities for a few people, the few who have initiative, Nepo babies. I'm sorry to say, life is very on who it's a horrible thing to have to admit. And then someone dogged and determined who doesn't know, they'll break through as well. But for a vast amount of people, and it's not just visual effects, it's, you talk to people who've got kids who have left university with degrees and they cannot get a job. And then they go to get a job in the pub and they can't get one there because the other 9 people beat them to the job in the pub. It's a really tough time to be that age, right? And things can right themselves over a few years, but not maybe this summer for the fresh graduates about to get their degrees. They're going to find it really tough. There needs to be a wave of opportunity, competitive tension in the market, opportunities coming, and they need to pursue their dreams and land near wherever they can. And that sounds really churlish as I listen to it, myself say it, but yeah, it's really, really tough. And I think people who want to originate content, there's this thing, businesses are beginning to people to, and established over a few years of people who want to originate content, and good quality storytelling, and film school people, they'll find a way to make things and get noticed, and they employ their friends who can do visual, like there is a community of people. But whether people find that period of stability to grow and progress and get paid for it in a hurry is going to be challenging. And I'm hoping 26 is a year of stabilization, because only from there will growth organically begin to come. But it might take longer for the contracted, evolving industry to land wherever it is and open up. So it's really, really tough.
We need the next group of people to go art, outside.
Is it just going to be relegated to art? All the things we've been talking about, which is
this is
the
it.
province of the wealthy. To make a living.
That is the whole point about worrying about it going the way of theatre.
Yeah, well, theatre's not dead, but it's it is quite exclusive mostly.
It is. Unless you can get in on a £10 deal and you can go and be a groundling somewhere, you're kind of stuck with £120 tickets if you want to see a good show starring a big name.
And then there's local. Some of it's really good, but again, the youth are not that into it. Mostly that I speak to, it's a parents and grandparents thing. And if you've been to the theatre recently, like I have, I was the youngest person there, which is great. I'm going to go more and more and more because that's a wonderful feeling.
I miss the theatre. I haven't been since my daughter was born, but one of the last things that I did with my wife was go to the theatre. We went to see Prima Facie, and it was phenomenal. Yeah,
I mean, again, good storytelling and entertainment is gripping and enriching, and and I
with one actor
as well. Well, amazing,
Yeah.
But I'm full of optimism because storytelling will not die. Right? It's the premium form of civilization that just differentiates it, from cave art on the walls to, the invention of cinema, photography, moving image. It's not going to die. And at some point it will stabilize and out of that will evolve a future for entertainment stories. I just hope it's not you and I sat in our living rooms going, don't kill Han Solo.
I think that's a good note to end.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for this.
It's a pleasure.
This has been great.
It's really lovely to catch up with you. Enjoying watching what you're doing.
Thank you very much.